When it comes to choosing a rock and roll bed in your T5 or T6 conversion, I'm going to guess that safety is the highest priority. I'm Lee, this is Coombe Valley Campers, and today we're going to be showing you how to fit the safest bed on the market made in the UK. I wasn't lying when I said that this bed is the safest available that's made in the UK. Rusty Lee and his team of engineers have worked very hard to ensure that this bed and all of the stuff you see here in front of me has been tested to the highest levels, and that is the German Tuv standard. A lot of the beds that are available out there, and there are a lot, have all been tested to a certain standard. However, none of them that are made in the UK have been Tuv tested, and that involves a lot more stringent tests, and it's actually cost a lot of money because you actually have to provide a shell of a T5 van. The bed then gets bolted into that vehicle shell, and then the tests are applied to the bed in the vehicle under a normal crash situation. So they're pull tested, impact tested, crash tested. And this bed behind me has passed with flying colours. And it's why we're featuring it with you today. You may have seen in the past that we have featured Rusty Lee single swivel seat bases, double swivel seat bases, and even a seat that is suitable for early vans such as the split screen, the bay window, and even the T3. We'll leave links down below so you can go and watch those videos at your leisure. The single swivel bases, the double swivel bases, they are all Tuv tested as well. So again, those seat bases are tested to the highest levels. So what's in the kit? Behind us, we have a full width rock and roll bed, and it is hydraulically assisted as well as having all of the seat belts included. So you can have 3 people sat in this bed, all with shoulder 3-point inertia reel seat belts. And then it's all mounted into your vehicle using the kit that we've got in front of me. Now, when it comes to spreader plates, this is the daddy. You know, this is the thing that keeps the bed in position and enables this seat to be tested to the highest standards. You've got 1 large spreader plate here and 2 of the smaller spreader plates, and that distributes the weight evenly under the floor when it comes to a crash situation in this vehicle. And we're going to be pulling this van apart, showing you how it's fitted, and enabling you to be able to fit this at home if you so wish. It's not that difficult. However, what we've done today is chosen probably the most difficult van to fit this to. This is an early T5. It's a 2005 model, and it's a twin slider caravel, which means it had 2, maybe 3 rows of seats in the back. Sorry, it had 1, maybe 2 rows of seats in the back. It's got strengthening plates underneath already, and some of those plates have to be removed so we can fit this large plate in front of me. So the van you may be fitting this to actually is probably going to be easier. However, we are kind of glad that we've got this vehicle because it shows the extremity of what you might have to go to. And 9 times out of 10, if you've got a panel van conversion, for example, you won't have to do what I'm doing to this van. But that being said, we've got this to fit in. Let's not hang around, let's get straight on with it. What we're going to do now then is grind all of the parts underneath this caravel and prepare it for the plate. If you don't have a caravel and you want to skip all these parts, go to the timestamp that I'm pointing to here. So the time that's across the bottom, that's where you want to go to carry on fitting the plate. Before we start anything, the first thing we're going to have to do is to remove everything under here. Now, first step would be to remove your spare wheel. This one doesn't have one here at the minute, so that's fine. But to remove the spare wheel, you've got to drop this tray. That is by 2 19mm bolts. We're going to have to remove this tray entirely. So once we've removed those 2 19 bolts, there's a pin at the back, and then the whole tray will come away. We'll put that to one side. Then there is the series of 8mm screws, or 8mm headed screws and these captive type caps. I don't even know what you'd call them, but you find these underneath all T5s and T6s, and these are the two methods that all of these plastic underbelly trays are held up, and we've got to remove all of these plastic trays to get to this big chassis rail here. That's what we've got to do. I'm not going to go into it. It's basically a case of removing all of the nuts and bolts until what you've got, removing all the nuts and bolts until you've got these plastic trays away. Hopefully your van isn't as old as this one. This is a 2005, so this is knocking on 16 years old now, and things have started to get a little bit crusty. But yeah, we've got a can of lubricant here. We're just going to make sure everything's rinsed down first so it's easier to take off, and we'll just get on it. So next time you see me, I will have removed all of these plastic trays, and we'll be ready to start bolting things up. Let's get on with it. One of the good things about this kit is you don't actually need to jack up the vehicle to install it. If your vehicle is stock height, you will just be able to put down a mat and install everything from underneath or up top. We've jacked the vehicle up today to make it easier to film. You'll see it's like really nicely lit under here as well, so you can actually see everything we're doing. If you do jack up your car, make sure to follow the guidelines in your user manual and that you are safe and the wheels are chocked. With those two underbelly trays now removed, you can see what we're dealing with under here. The big plate that I showed you right at the beginning actually fits over this plate here. Now, if you own a standard panel van, this chassis rail between left and right beams is just one piece that doesn't have these lips on, and it doesn't have these bolts in. These bolts were put in, oh, they're going to be easy to come out. These bolts were put in to hold the rear row of caravel seat mounting points. Now, if yours was a panel van from new, it wouldn't have this. So what I'm going to have to do, or what you're going to have to do if you are putting one of these seats in a caravel, is remove this lip, and I believe these 2 points here, because the plate that you've seen at the beginning of the video is meant to fit snugly in these 2 plates. So that's what we're going to do, but first things first, let's see if we remove these bolts. I think whoever converted this van the first time maybe just ground off these bolts as opposed to undoing them. Don't do that if you can help it. So let's see if we can remove these bolts. I'm going to need a 19mm. 19 or 17? 17. So if I find my 17mm, where are you? Keep all your tools in one place, people, that's a good start. I'll get my 17 and I'll come back to you. Right, gonna go get my crowbar. Hammer. Cool. At the beginning of the video, I showed you the big chassis plate, spreader plate that goes up here, and then 2 smaller ones which go in 1 and 2 recesses there. Now, I'm going to have to pull down this exhaust, and do excuse the exhaust. I don't know who put this on, but it looks awful, and it's all been badly welded back here, but I'm going to have to drop the exhaust down so I can get that plate in there. So that's another bit of access I'm going to need. And also, being an early version, there's no access into this chassis rail. It's different on later versions. I think you're able to get into the chassis rail over here because there is a plate which slides in, and you then put 1 and 2 bolts through, which keeps that rear spreader plate or the large spreader plate in one place. So being an early and being a Caravelle, there's more jobs I've got to do. I've got to remove the lips, and I've also got to remove the bumper and this crash bar to get my piece in there, to get the plate in there. So again, enjoy that, and yeah, I'll catch you on the other side. What I'm doing here is the worst case scenario. If you've got a later than, I don't know, 2007 van, you won't have to do what I'm doing because this is an early T5. The area that you need to access to put one of the captive plates in is closed. So I'm having to remove the bumper, remove the crash bar to slide those captive nuts in. It'll all make sense in a minute, but yes, if you own a normal panel van, you won't have to do this, but in this case we're doing it, which is good. We are showing you the absolute worst case scenario, so if you own a twin slider Caravelle early model, this is the worst it's going to be. So let's get this rear bumper bar off. Don't worry, for most vans, you won't need to remove the rear bumper. However, like I said before, this one's an exception to the rule. It's an early Caravelle, so there is a few more things that you're gonna have to do. This is worst case scenario, don't forget that. So I've just removed the rear bumper, removed the rear bar, which is this one here, and that will now give me access into these two chassis rails. On later vans, like yours potentially, you'll be able to get this plate with these two captive nuts in from another part from underneath. However, we can't do on this, so those two plates go in there, and I'll show you why later. But for right now, I'm happy that we've got everything undone. We've got access to everything we need. Now I'm gonna just have another clear up, and then we'll get under there and grind away the bits that we don't actually need. Now everything is removed from underneath, we're now gonna offer this plate up. Now, like I said before, if you've got a panel van, this should just go straight in. With this, we've got some bits to remove, and I'm just about to show you that now. So, excuse the funny angle, but I wanted to show you this plate and up here. So, this area here is meant to go directly over this chassis member. In this case, it's not going to, because we've got a return lip here and a return lip here. We've also got these strengthening bars left and right. Now, that was for a Caravelle, and a Caravelle has a rear set of seats which bolt in all the way along the back. We're not using that anymore. We're replacing that whole strengthening plate with this. But what we've got to do is not remove this whole area, it's removing that lip, and these two. It won't go in otherwise. You'll be able to see from this plate that it's exactly the same width to fit in between these two runners. And then when it is in, we've got, in fact, if I flip it over, if I can, in fact, I'll show you like this. We have one hole here, and then another two at the back. Now these two match up with 1 and 2 here, and then we need to drill the chassis once this is up in this position. So we're gonna put the plate up and then bolt it through those holes, and then drill 2 holes to put supplied nuts and bolts in. And that's about it. But I'm gonna get out now because this is really heavy and I need to get all my PPE on to start grinding under there. So what we're doing on these brackets is grinding out or drilling out the spot welds, and you need the right drill bit for it really, and it's a bit of a pain, but it's a lot cleaner than grinding it off, so we'll try our best. So we'll do that, drill out the spot welds, and then chisel it off with a bit of luck. In order for this plate to fit a caravel, we have just had to grind the lips away from the main beam that goes from the left and right chassis rail. We've had to remove these brackets that go left and right of that beam as well. So that was, we drilled out the spot welds and then chiseled them off. We've ground everything flush, and then we've laid some paint over the top just to keep that nice and protected. Now it's time to fit the plate. The next stage then is to fit the plate under the van. It's the first thing you do. What we have to do is place this plate over the beam. We are then going to put these plates into the chassis rail, and we need to put bolts through these two holes, which are the larger two. We have a look here. The larger two, although that's a silly thing to say, the two holes that are spaced wider apart are going to tally up with the two captive nuts on this plate here. Now on this van in particular, we've had to remove the bumper to slide those plates in, but on a normal van you won't have to do that. Once the plate is held up into position and bolted down to these two plates, only then will you drill out the two holes in the chassis rail that match up with these two holes here. Once that's in and done, then we will position the bed to where it needs to be, drill holes through the floor, through this plate, mount the bolts, and then we can do the last two secure M14 bolts in the corners. So quite a lot to do still, but easy when you do it in a step-by-step process. So let's get under the van, pop this plate up. We're going to lay these bolts into the holes, and then we can work on threading them into these plates. So let's get on with it. So what we're going to do now is kind of bench press this into position, and once I've got my bolts ready, I'm just going to lay the bolts into the pre-drilled holes on the side, 1 and 2, and they're going to line up perfectly with the pre-drilled holes in the chassis. So let's give it a go. In. So 1 in there, 1 in there, 3 and 4. Whew. Right, cool. So what I can do now is slot in those two plates. There's one here, and what it will do is when I put it in, this plate will slide the other side of this rail, and then these nuts will thread straight into that. So if you sit under here, sorry, it's a bit too close to the camera. If you sit under here, I will stand out here, and hopefully they will wind into place. So we thought it was going to be a bit of a struggle, but they are in and solid. Really happy with that. Now, only once those plates have gone in and they're tight can you now move on to the next stage, which is drilling out these 2 holes. There's 2 this side, in fact, and there's 2 this side. Now I've got a 10mm to hand. Yeah, a 10.5 isn't going to fit, so a 10mm is all you're going to need. And we're literally just going to plough the 10mm straight through there. We're then going to protect it with a little bit of paint, and then we're going to put in the supplied nuts, bolts and washers. And that's about it. So, drill bit in the hole. Sorry, drill bit in the drill. I'm going to find my glasses and then I'm going to start drilling. So now the holes are drilled, I've thrown a bit of paint in there, so the bare metal is protected. And now you can see that I can get this side, which is really handy. So you've got 2 nylocks, 2 bolts, 4 washers. And they go in there. And once all 4 are done, that is the chassis. That is this chassis plate finished. And what you'll be able to do then is line the bed up. And we're actually getting into the fun stuff, you know, actually putting your bed in, which is nice. So I'm just going to finish tightening all these up, and then I'll bring you back when we're moving the bed about. Now we're happy that the large plate underneath the van is secure and in position, it's time to position your bed. Now, fortunately for us, this bed was already in, so you didn't have to see us struggle putting it in the first place. We've got some measurements to stick to, and we've also got some places that we need to take measurements from as well. The main one being from the back of this box section of the bed. It doesn't matter where you put it, left and right. Well, it does, you'd probably prefer it more even and in the center. But the measurement you need to concentrate on is from the back of this box section to this metal lip right here. Now this metal lip is where your rear door rubber clips to. So remove your rubber seal, grab a tape measure, and you want to be measuring from here 260mm. Now if you're not happy with the 260mm, you can move it forward and back a little bit. That is why you see that large spreader plate, because it's giving you an option as to where you put that bed. However, that's the guidance I've been given. So let's move it into position. We will test the position of the bed with the rear cushion. And we'll close the tailgate and you can see that if anything's touching. So let's go on with it. It's quite handy on this floor at the moment. It slips around quite easy, so it's nice and easy to position. So I'm going to take some measurements now, put the cushion on just to test the position of it, and then we shall have it all installed. We have taken measurements from the back of the bed to the side wall on both sides, from this point here to both sides, and right at the front of the bed against the wheel arches, and we've made sure that that's even. Now, just before I said that the measurement from here down to there should be 260. That's not working in this van for more than one reason. The first one being, this floor is huge. It's an 18mm floor, and also this is a rear caravel step, so it's bigger than you might find in your van conversion, so just take that into account. Also, if you take a look up there, that is a caravel door card. And a caravel door card is about 3 centimetres, it protrudes about 3 centimetres away from the door. If you have a normal panel van or a camper van conversion, you will more than likely have a ply door card or a factory hardboard door card. So to that end, this is towards the front of the van, 3 centimetres. Nothing we can do about that. The customer has converted this van themselves. This is how they've chosen to done it. This is how they've chosen to do it. It's up to me now to fit the bed, which is absolutely fine. So I've now found the ultimate position for this bed from this point to here, from side to side and front to back as well. I'm happy that it's even. Now what's left to do is to drill the holes. Now the holes are 12mm. You will need a 12mm drill bit, and the bolts are an M12 as well. So it's literally going to be a case of drilling out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes. Once they are all in and in position, then we have 2 M14s or 14mm holes here and here. Now, yeah, they're pretty beefy, I understand that, but that is the biggest thing that helps this become a Tuv qualified, Tuv tested bed. It's those big side plates on the sides that we'll get to in a minute. So let's start with those 6 bolts, get them drilled all the way through. Now I'm going to hit it straight with a brand new 12mm drill bit. Now a lot of people might say you need to do a pilot first, etc, etc. However, I want to make sure that there's going to be no wandering of any drill bits, so I'm literally going to go straight through with a brand new 12mm drill bit, and we'll see how it works out. Once you're happy, the rear 3 bolts are in, or the holes are drilled and the bolts are in. Now's the time to mark these other 3. So with a Sharpie, I'm going to do 1, 2, and 3. And the reason we're doing that is basically because I can't get my drill with a drill bit in there. I can do that here, that's absolutely fine. But there's a no-no. Also, whilst you're here, let's get those larger holes to the right drilled, because you're not going to get your drill in there either. So we'll get them marked. Take your bolts out, slide the bed forward, get your holes drilled. Let's go. Off camera then, myself and Ali, who is holding the camera, have just popped all the bolts in, and one of us has been on top with the ratchet, just tightening them up, and I've been underneath with the spanner. I'm just going to now tighten them all up, the last bit personally, so I can get a feel of the torque of them. Just for reference, tightening them up on top of the wooden floor is 100% permissible. It was tested in a similar manner. I've spoken to the main fitter at Rusty Lee, and he said absolutely fine because of the large spreader plate underneath and because of the thickness of this box section. It's no need to have any tubes to go in between. If you're fitting onto a factory rubber floor, that's a different matter. And so if you are doing that, if you are fitting this bed to a factory rubber floor, speak to either myself or the fitting team at Rusty Lee and we can give you some further advice. So yes, we're going to now nip up all of these 6 bolts here, then we're going to move on to the 2 edge bolts. Now what you may have seen right at the beginning of the video is the 2 longer 8mm bolts, and that is purely for the front of the bed. Now in certain vehicles with certain floors, the fitters have found that the front of the bed can slightly lift, and the only reason the 8mm bolts are there are to bring the bed back down again. They're not structural, they're not part of the Tuv testing, it's literally just to keep the front of that bed down so the gap between the floor and the bed is nice and neat and you don't see any lifting. All the structure is here, so in the event of an accident you'll notice all of these braces around here, everything's triangulated, everything's welded, everything's made out of this is 3.7mm box steel, for example. The front one here is 2.5 and the rest of the bed is made out of the 2.5 or 3.7. It's a very strong bed, make no mistake there. But yes, the front 2 bolts are the 8mm. So yeah, we're going to knit these up. Then I'm going to talk to you about the side bolts. They're the M14s, and there's a certain way to fit those with these plates here. And then if we need to, we'll go and do those front 8mm bolts too. The last major anchor point on this bed then is the 2 tabs on either side. Now this is, as I've said before, the big difference between this bed and 99% of the others out there. What we're doing is fitting M14 bolts, those beefy things right there, through the side into these plates that then sit in the wings of the chassis. So you've got full strength all the way across the back plates of the chassis, either side of the 2 main rails that go from front to back. And you fit them by, well, we've pre-drilled the holes, we've drilled them out to a 14mm, and you'll notice that doesn't have a 14mm hole in it. So what we're going to do is pop that bolt in that hole, and then what we're going to do is dab a little bit of grease. In this case I'm using some copper anti-slip so you can see it on camera. But what I'm going to do is dab the end of that bolt with a bit of the grease, and then I'm going to offer this plate up to the underneath of the van, and when the grease covered bolt makes contact with this plate, that's where I know to drill the hole. Alright, and that's all it's going to be. So bolt through the hole. Once we're underneath, we're going to dab a bit of grease on, then offer this plate up in its best position. Once we know that point, we'll mark it, put it in the vise, drill it with a 14mm hole, and then button up all the bolts. All of the bolts are now in. We got there, and what a mission. No, it's not really. It does take a little time. If you want to do this properly, it does take time. We've had a bit of a mission today because it's an early van and it's a caravel, removing the rear bumper, removing the other little bits of metal to make the plate fit, but it's all been worthwhile. We now have this stunning bed in place. This is a little teaser as to the cushions that we're just about to put in. They have been trimmed by David Powell Upholstery, who is literally just across the road from us. He's a good friend of ours, and yeah, he has trimmed these in this beautiful textured fabric and the grey leather with a highlighted red stitching. I think it looks great, but you make your mind up once I've put all the cushions in place. And there we have it, one Tuv-Tested Rusty Lee rock and roll bed, full width rock and roll bed for a VW T5 or T6. And what a piece of kit it is. If I just jump up and lift it up, you will see that it comes up by itself, hydraulically assisted, and locks into place as well. Thank you very much for watching today. We've had some issues with the fitting of this bed, but purely because of the van it's in. But when it comes to you fitting this bed at home in your panel van conversion, T5 or T6, you should be able to do this very easily with a drill and a selection of hand tools. Oh, and 2 people. It's a very heavy piece of kit, and also when you're doing nuts and bolts up from the top and bottom of the van, it's way easier with 2 people. Thanks very much again to Rusty Lee for supplying us with the beds and enabling us to sell these beds for him. If you want to buy this bed or any of the other crash-tested Rusty Lee products, make sure to click in the link in the description where you'll head to coomvalleycampers.co.uk and you'll be able to make your purchase there. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.